My daughter called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice careful in the way it gets when she's trying not to worry me. "Dad," she said, "I drove past Ray's place on my way to pick up the kids. Mom's car was in the driveway. It was there yesterday, too. And the day before." She paused. "I thought you said she was at her book club." I was standing in my kitchen in Hamilton, Ontario, holding a coffee mug that had gone cold an hour ago. Outside, it was the kind of gray November afternoon that makes you feel the year is closing in on itself. I looked out the window at the bare maple in the backyard, the one I planted the year we moved into this house, 37 years ago. "She probably just stopped by," I said. "You know how she is with Ray's wife. Ray's wife is in Calgary, visiting her sister. She's been gone 2 weeks." I set the mug down very slowly on the counter. "I'm sure it's nothing," I told my daughter. "Thanks for letting me know." I hung up. I stood there for a long time without moving. Ray had been my business partner for 22 years. We built Caldwell and Associates Construction together, from a 2-man operation working residential renovations to a mid-sized firm that handled commercial contracts across southern Ontario. He was the best man at our renewal of vows on our 25th anniversary. He'd coached my daughter's soccer team when she was 9 years old. He called my wife his honorary big sister, and she called him the brother she never had. I picked up my phone again and opened the RBC mobile app. I hadn't checked the joint investment account in about 6 weeks. I'd been busy with a project in Burlington, and I trusted my wife with the household finances the way you trust someone you've slept beside for almost 4 decades. The balance on the screen didn't make sense. $41,000 was gone. Not spent, transferred. 3 separate transfers over the past month, each one just under $15,000, routed to an account I didn't recognize. I sat down at the kitchen table because my legs decided they were done standing. I didn't call my wife. I didn't call Ray. I sat at that table for 2 hours, replaying every small, strange thing from the past several months. The evenings she said she was tired and went to bed early. The weekend she drove to her sister's in Guelph, except her sister had mentioned to me the following week that they hadn't seen each other since the summer. The way she'd started carrying her phone face down on every surface, something she'd never done before in 37 years. When you're 64 years old and you've built an entire life with someone, you don't want to be right about these things. You bargain with the evidence. You look for another explanation. You turn it over and look at it from every angle, hoping it changes shape. It didn't change shape. I called my lawyer the next morning at 8 o'clock. His name is David Park, and I've known him for 18 years. He handled the incorporation of my company, my will, every property purchase I've ever made in this province. When I told him what I'd found in the bank account, he went quiet for a moment. "Don't touch the account," he said. "Don't say a word to your wife or Ray. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I was there by 2. David is methodical. He doesn't react dramatically to things. He listened to everything I told him, asked precise questions, wrote notes on a legal pad in his small, careful handwriting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me over his reading glasses. "Here's what concerns me beyond the bank transfers," he said. "When did you last review the shareholder registry for Caldwell and Associates?" I told him I hadn't looked at it in some time. Ray managed most of the administrative side of the company. That had always been our arrangement. I ran operations. He handled the office. David turned to his computer. He spent about 10 minutes on the phone with the company's branch, then another 20 minutes with the Provincial Land Registry office. He came back to the table with a printed document and placed it in front of me without a word. The shareholder registry showed that 3 weeks ago, my ownership stake in Caldwell and Associates Construction had been reduced from 50% to 15%. The remaining 35% had been transferred to a numbered company I had never seen before. I stared at the paper. "I didn't sign anything," I said. "I know. The signature on file isn't right." David pulled up an image on his screen. "I have the documents you signed at incorporation. Look at the R in your signature. The way you close it. This document doesn't match." He also pulled up the land title records on the Muskoka property. The cottage my father built in 1971, the one I'd inherited and renovated over 30 years, the one where my daughter had her first birthday party and where I'd taught my grandchildren to fish off the dock. There was a transfer request on file, initiated 4 weeks ago, naming Ray's numbered company as the recipient. It hasn't gone through yet, David said. The Ontario land transfer process takes time, but if we don't file a caution against the title today, it could be completed within weeks. I felt the room tilt slightly. Is my wife aware of this? David looked at me the way you look at someone when the answer is yes, but you don't want to be the one to say it. The documents initiating the share transfer were submitted by a paralegal working out of a firm in Mississauga. The same paralegal filed the cottage transfer. That paralegal is registered as working under a lawyer named Gordon Fitch. He paused. Gordon Fitch was disbarred in British Columbia 6 years ago for document fraud. He's been operating under a different registration in Ontario. I thought about Ray at our company Christmas party last year, making a toast about partnership and loyalty, and the kind of trust that only comes from building something together. I thought about my wife, laughing at whatever he said and touching his arm. 2 years, I thought. Maybe longer. What do? I said. It wasn't really a question. First, we filed a caution on the Muskoka property today. That stops the transfer cold. Second, I contact RBC's fraud division about those account withdrawals. Third, you need to say nothing. Not to her, not to Ray, not to anyone. You go home tonight and you act as though nothing has happened. I nodded. And Martin, he said, there's one more thing. He hesitated in a way that David Park almost never does. I called a colleague who does elder law. She mentioned something. There's a form that was submitted to a private assessment clinic in Oakville last month. A request for a cognitive capacity evaluation. He looked directly at me. The form was submitted by your wife. It described you as showing progressive memory loss, confusion, erratic financial behavior, the kind of form that, if supported by a medical opinion, could be used to apply for guardianship of your estate. I was 64 years old. I ran a construction company. I supervised project timelines and managed subcontractor budgets and knew every building code revision that had come through the province in the last decade. There was nothing wrong with my mind, but someone had decided that saying there was would make it easier to take everything I had. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my truck for a minute before going inside. The lights were on in the kitchen. My wife was making dinner. I could see her through the window, moving around the stove, perfectly ordinary, perfectly calm. I went inside. I hung up my coat. I kissed her on the cheek and told her the drive home had been slow because of construction on the QEW. She said that was terrible and served me a bowl of soup. We watched the news after dinner. She fell asleep with her head on her hand during the weather segment. I sat next to her and I thought about 37 years, the night our daughter was born. The summer we nearly lost the business, and she worked double shifts at her office job to keep us afloat. The trip we took to Nova Scotia for our 30th anniversary, driving the Cabot Trail in a rental car with the windows down. All of it real, all of it true. And somehow, still, all of it ending here, in this living room. While she slept like someone who had done nothing wrong, I went upstairs and I went through her desk. I know her passwords because we made a list of them years ago in case of emergency. That's the kind of people we were. That's how much we trusted each other. Her email was open on her laptop. I searched Ray's name. There were hundreds of messages going back nearly 3 years. I read for 2 hours. By the end, I had to put the laptop down and go stand at the bathroom sink with cold water running over my wrists. The emails were explicit in every sense. They were also businesslike in a way that was somehow worse than the personal parts. There were messages discussing specific documents, specific timelines, specific dollar amounts. Ray had written, Fitch says the capacity assessment creates the legal framework. Once it's filed with the court, Martin can't contest the transfers. He'll be the confused old man trying to understand paperwork. My wife had written back, What about our daughter? Ray had written, She gets her inheritance, eventually. This just changes the structure. She'll understand once it's done. She'll understand. My daughter, who called me to say she'd noticed her mother's car in a driveway because she was worried about me. My daughter, who, every Sunday, drove 40 minutes to bring her kids over for lunch because she wanted them to know their grandfather. I photographed every relevant email on my phone. I sent copies to a private folder in my own email account. Then I closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it and went to bed. I didn't sleep. At 6 in the morning, I was at a walk-in medical clinic before it opened, first in line. When the doctor saw me, I explained that I needed a full cognitive assessment documented on official letterhead. I told him briefly why. He was a young doctor and he looked at me with something between discomfort and determination. He ran every test available in that clinic. He referred me across the street for 2 more. By 11 o'clock, I had a written assessment from 2 physicians stating that my cognitive function was above average for my age group, that there were 0 indicators of memory impairment, and that I was in full capacity to manage my own affairs. I asked for certified copies. I got 4. I met David at his office at noon. I laid out everything: the emails, the assessment, the 4 certified copies of my medical documentation. David read through the emails in silence. When he finished, he took off his glasses and set them on the desk. "Gordon Fitch is going to prison," he said. "The question is how much of this lands on Ray." "All of it," I said. "I want all of it to land on Ray. His emails are direct. He knew exactly what was happening. This isn't plausible deniability territory." David pulled out a notepad. "I'm going to contact the Ontario Provincial Police Financial Crimes Unit today. This is beyond civil fraud. The forged documents, the corporate transfer, the land title manipulation, the capacity assessment, filed under false pretenses. This is criminal fraud. Martin, multiple charges." "And my wife?" David was quiet for a moment. "She's in the emails. She's aware. She's a participant." "I know. How do you want to proceed?" I thought about it. I thought about it for a long time. "I want the charges to go where they belong," I said. "Fully. But I want her to cooperate. If she cooperates, if she gives them everything on Ray and Fitch, I want that considered. Even then, she'll have a record. You understand that?" "Yes." "And the marriage?" "Is over," I said. "That was over the moment I read those emails. I just need the rest of it finished properly." David nodded slowly. "One more thing. Your daughter. She should hear this from you before anything else happens." That was the part I had been dreading most. I called my daughter that evening and asked her to come over alone, without the kids. She arrived at 7, still in her work clothes, reading my face the way she's always been able to do since she was about 12 years old. "Tell me," she said, before she'd even taken off her coat. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told her everything. I showed her the emails. I showed her the documents. I showed her the medical assessment and what it had been intended to counter. She went very still, the kind of still that happens before something breaks. "She let him use me," my daughter said finally. "She let him say my name, that I'd understand eventually, that this was for the family." She stopped. Her voice was controlled, but only barely. "He coached my team. He was at my wedding. He held my children." "I know. And Mom let him." There was nothing to add to that. She asked if she could stay. She slept in her old room for the first time in 8 years. The next morning, I went to the office at Caldwell and Associates, as I normally would. Ray was already there when I arrived, coffee on his desk, going over a project file. He looked up and smiled the way he always had. Easy and familiar. The smile of a man who doesn't know yet that everything is already over. "Morning," he said. "Burlington project came in under budget, by the way. Good week." "Good week," I agreed. I stayed for 2 hours. I acted exactly as I always had. Then I told him I had a doctor's appointment and left. The OPP financial crimes investigators came to David's office the following afternoon. There were 2 of them, both thorough and methodical, the way people who work financial fraud cases tend to be. They spent 4 hours reviewing the evidence. They asked careful questions. At the end, one of them told me they had enough to move forward. "Gordon Fitch has a file with us already," she said. "We've been looking for a clear case to use. This is it. As for your business partner, these emails establish intent and direct participation. We'll move on him within 48 hours. I asked about my wife. That depends on her cooperation. If she's willing to come in voluntarily and provide a full statement, the Crown will take that into account. But she needs to understand the exposure she's facing. The capacity assessment alone, filed under false pretenses, is a serious matter." I went home that night. My wife was watching television. I sat down across from her. not next to her. She looked at me. Something in my face must have told her, because her expression shifted in a way I hadn't seen before. Martin, I know everything, I said. The emails, the documents, Fitch, the capacity assessment, all of it. She said nothing. The color left her face very slowly, like water draining out of a bowl. The OPP is moving on Ray tomorrow, I said. Fitch is already being looked at. You have until tomorrow morning to contact David's office and agree to cooperate. If you cooperate fully, the Crown may consider a different outcome for you. If you don't, you face the same charges as Ray. Martin, I don't want to hear it tonight, I said. I can't. I want you to call David tomorrow morning. That's all I'm asking. I went upstairs. I heard her crying from the kitchen. I lay down on my side of the bed, in the dark, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I thought about 37 years. I thought about my daughter asleep down the hall in her childhood bedroom. I thought about the Muskoka cottage and the morning light on the water and the way the dock creaks in the summer when the kids run out to the end of it. I thought, I am still here. I still have all of that. They didn't get it. That was the thing that kept me breathing through the night. Ray was arrested the following morning at the Caldwell and Associates office. My daughter told me later that 2 OPP officers walked through the front door at 9:15 and that the 3 employees in the main room had gone completely silent. Ray had apparently tried to speak, tried to explain something, and then stopped. He walked out between the 2 officers without another word. She said it was the quietest thing she'd ever seen. Gordon Fitch was arrested the same morning at his Mississauga office. My wife called David at 8:30 that morning. She came in that afternoon with a lawyer she'd found on her own, a quiet woman in her 50s who clearly understood the situation and advised her client accordingly. My wife gave a full statement. She confirmed the timeline, the plan, every meeting with Ray and Fitch, every document she'd been aware of. She was in that office for 4 hours. When she came out, she looked like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a long time and had finally set it down, not with relief, but with exhaustion. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be. David called me afterward. She held nothing back, he said. It's comprehensive. Ray's defense has essentially no room to work in. And the cottage? The caution stands. The transfer is nullified. It's yours. The company shares? We're filing to reverse the registry change. Given the evidence of forgery, it won't be contested. You'll be back at 50% within 6 weeks. And the money from the investment account? RBC's fraud team is already moving to recover it. Transfers made under fraudulent authorization can be clawed back. You'll likely recover most of it. I sat with all of that for a moment. Thank you, David, I said. Don't thank me. You did the hard part. You kept your head when most people wouldn't have. The preliminary hearing was held 6 weeks later at the Copernicus Courthouse in Hamilton. Ray and Fitch appeared together, both with defense counsel. I sat in the gallery with David beside me. Ray looked over at me once, just once, when he entered the room. His expression wasn't defiant or regretful. It was something I couldn't quite name, like a man who had finally accepted a reality he'd been avoiding for a long time. The Crown presented the evidence in summary. The forged shareholder documents, the fraudulent land transfer filing, the unauthorized bank withdrawals, the capacity assessment filed under false pretenses. The judge heard submissions on both sides and ordered the matter to trial. Ray's lawyer filed a motion, arguing that his client had been misled by Fitch into believing the documents were legitimate. Fitch's lawyer argued the opposite. The Crown pointed to the emails and let them speak for themselves. My daughter came to the hearing. She sat beside me the whole time, her shoulder against mine, not speaking. When it was over and we walked out into the cold December afternoon, she took my arm the way she used to when she was small and we were crossing a busy street. You okay? She asked. Getting there, I said. You? She was quiet for a moment. Mom called me last week. She wants to talk. I didn't say anything. I'm not ready, she said. But I think I will be, eventually. I don't know what that looks like yet. You don't have to know yet. She nodded. I know. We walked to our cars in silence, and it was the most comfortable silence I'd felt in months. The trial began in February and lasted 9 days. I testified on the 3rd day. I sat in the witness box and I answered every question the Crown asked me directly and completely. Ray's lawyer cross-examined me for nearly 2 hours. He tried several angles: that I was confused about the documents, that the company restructuring had been discussed and I'd simply forgotten, that the bank transfers were authorized and I was misremembering. I looked at him calmly. "I have been running a construction company in this province for 40 years, I said. I have signed hundreds of contracts, dozens of land transfers, multiple corporate registrations. I know what my signature looks like. I know what I have and have not authorized. I did not authorize any of what is in evidence here. The suggestion that I forgot is precisely what these men were counting on when they filed a fraudulent capacity assessment with a private clinic in Oakville. They were trying to establish a record to make this moment, this exact moment, less credible. It didn't work." The courtroom was very quiet. The lawyer asked no further questions. On the 6th day, the Crown called 2 other victims to testify. An elderly couple from Mississauga who had lost their family home through the same mechanism. A forged power of attorney submitted through Fitch's office, a share transfer in a small business the husband had operated for 30 years. A retired teacher from Burlington, 71 years old, who had lost $60,000 from her savings account over 4 months. She testified in a steady voice that broke only once when she described realizing she wouldn't have enough left to help her grandchildren with university. Ray was not the architect of what happened to those people. That was Fitch. But Ray knew about at least 2 of those cases. The emails confirmed it. He had referred them to Fitch through a network of contacts in exchange for a commission on whatever was recovered. I hadn't known that before the trial. The judge delivered her verdict on a Thursday morning. Gray sky outside the courthouse windows. A light snow just beginning. She found Ray guilty on 4 counts. Fraud over $5,000. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Forgery of documents. And participation in a scheme to defraud a vulnerable person. She found Fitch guilty on 11 counts across multiple victims. Ray received 7 years. He would be eligible for parole at the halfway point, but the judge was direct about her view that early release would require substantial demonstration of accountability. Fitch received 12 years, given his history, his role as the legal architect of the scheme, and the number of victims involved. He was also permanently prohibited from practicing law or working in any capacity involving legal documents. Both men were ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. I sat very still when the sentences were read. I had expected to feel something definitive in that moment. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. What I actually felt was quieter than that, like a door closing in a distant part of the house. My wife pleaded guilty separately, 2 weeks before the main trial concluded, as part of her cooperation agreement with the Crown. She received a conditional discharge with 12 months of probation and community service. She was ordered to have no contact with me without mutual agreement, and she was permanently removed from any role related to my financial or legal affairs. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the trial ended. David handled it. My wife did not contest a single term. She kept the car and her personal savings. Everything else remained as it had always been. Mine, built by me, over 40 years. She moved to an apartment in Guelph, near her sister. My daughter went to see her once, in the spring. She came home quiet and sat on my back porch with me, watching the evening come in, neither of us saying much. Finally, she said, "She's not the person I thought she was, but she's also not only this." I don't know what to do with both of those things at the same time. "You don't have to do anything with them right now," I said. "They can just both be true." She nodded slowly. The Muskoka cottage opened that June, as it did every year. My daughter drove up with the kids on the Friday before the long weekend. I was already there, had gone up 2 days early to check the dock after the winter, air out the rooms, get everything ready. The same things I'd done every spring for 30 years. The oldest grandchild, 11 now, came running down the path to the dock before he'd even gone inside the cottage. I heard him shouting that the lake was too cold to swim, and could we fish instead, and when was dinner? I called back that we'd fish first and eat after. We spent 4 days there. We fished off the dock in the mornings. We made fires in the evening. The youngest one fell asleep in my lap on Saturday night, with her feet tucked under the blanket and her face turned toward the fire, completely at peace in the way that only children can be. My daughter caught a bass on Sunday afternoon, her first in about 15 years, and she held it up and laughed in a way I hadn't heard from her in a long time. I took a photo on my phone. She's got my father's hands around that fish, the same broad grip, the same pleased expression. I printed that photo when I got home and put it on the shelf in my study. I'm back to running the company 3 days a week. The other 2, I do what I choose. I've been building a canoe in my garage over the winter months, cedar strip, the way my father taught me. It'll be ready by next summer. I told my grandson we'll take it out at the cottage for the first time together. I received a letter from Ray in September. It came through the prison mail, forwarded through David's office. His handwriting was smaller than I remembered, more careful. He wrote that he understood if I never read the letter. He wrote that there was no version of an explanation that made what he did acceptable, that he had taken a friendship of 22 years and turned it into an instrument. He wrote that he thought about our company, about the work we'd done together, the buildings we'd put up that were still standing all over this region, and that those things had been real even if he hadn't been. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. I didn't know what I would say that would mean anything, but I didn't throw it out either. It seemed like the kind of thing a person should keep, not to hold over anyone, just as a record. Proof that it happened. Proof that I was here for all of it, and that I'm still here. That's the part they didn't count on. They had a version of me in their heads. The aging man who'd worked hard and built things, and was now slowing down. A signature to be forged. An estate to be redirected. A life to be quietly dismantled from the inside. They thought the most dangerous thing about me was my trust in them. They thought that trust made me manageable. They were wrong about what kind of man they were dealing with. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't do a single impulsive thing from the moment my daughter told me about her mother's car in that driveway to the morning the OPP walked through the office door. I went step by step, quietly and methodically, the way you build something that needs to hold weight. You don't cut corners. You do each part right before you move to the next. You know the difference between moving fast and moving well. They thought my years were a liability. 40 years of work was what buried them. Last week I had coffee with David. We sat in a place on King Street he likes, one of those narrow spots that's been in the same location since before either of us started shaving. He asked me how things were. I told him things were good. I meant it. He said, "You know, not everyone would have handled this the way you did. Most people would have gone in swinging the moment they saw that bank balance." "And then what?" I said. He smiled. "And then nothing," which is exactly the point. We talked about other things after that. His grandchildren, the weather, whether the Leafs had any realistic hope this season, normal things, good things. I drove home through the late afternoon light, the November sky doing its thing again. That specific gray that means winter is coming but hasn't arrived yet. The maple in the backyard has lost all its leaves. It looks bare and clean and completely itself. I'll plant a new one in the spring, further along the fence line, where it'll get more light. I've been thinking about that for a while now. It's time.